guys, today we'll read a book. Today is a very special day because today we'll read a new book. This is Elf, and it is growing up in early America. It is like stories and epica books. Okay, let's read the first story. I will read the word to watch for. Words to watch for. Computer, Native America's pioneer. Pilgrim. Introduction. If you are an American child, you might live in a small, nice house. Your parents probably have a car, maybe even two. You may have a pet like a dog, cat, or bunny. You might have a bike to ride on a trampoline to jump on. Your parents might drive you to schools, or you might take a bus. Maybe you are homeschooled. You might enjoy eating cheeseburgers or peanut butter and jelly sandwich. You probably know how to use a microwave and how to fill a dishwasher. You might even have your own computer. These are all things that many American children enjoy today. But imagine if you weren't living today and instead you were living in the early years of America. What if you were a pilgrim coming to America, or a ship, or a Native American child living in a wigwam? Life would be much different. What would you do for fun? What would you wear? What if you were a pilgrim on the open prairies, or a newspaper carrier in a fast growing city? Would you like to go to a school? How will you travel from place to place? Let's start near the beginning of America's history and find out what life would be like if you are growing up in early Americas. Words to watch for. Native lands, homeland. Indian children. Now I'll read you a Bible. No, not a Bible, like a poem. Okay. Indian Child by Effie One. Where we walked to school each day, Indian children used to play all about our native land, where the shops and house stands and the trees are very tall, and there was no streets at all, not a church and not a steep, only woods and Indian people. Only wigwams on the ground and a nice bears crowding around a different place today where we live and work and play. Okay, now it's chapter 1. Words for Maker, Native Americas. First people know to live in America. Warriors, one who skilled in battles. Micah, the Native America. Micah family lived in America before Pilgrim crossed this ocean. They knew how to live in this land and to find food. They had everything with their hands. Hooks for fishing, wigwams for sleeping, and bows and arrows for hunting. Micah probably learned to hunt and fish when he was very young. Maybe he even had his own bow and arrow. The people in Micah family usually wore animal skins or feather or clothes. His mother would probably work very hard to make him clothes that would keep him warm in the winter and cool in the summer. Native America feathers wanted their boys to play games that made them smarter or stronger. When Micah played, he may have chased other boys or raced with them to become faster. This game would make him a better hunter. Sometimes he may have pretended to be a warrior like his father or grandfather. The big wishful watch for Kimmy, Raspberry, the big white bird. This story describes what it may have been looked like in America before the first settler, as imagined by the author. Big white bird, says Kimma as she clapped her small hands together. What a bird! Hush now, says Mama. Micah, watch your sister while I work. Micah drops to the ground and took out a tiny drum. He tried to play it just like the men in the village did. Gemma giggles and listened to the drums. Bird, 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 she sang. What is this bird she is talking about? Asked Mama as she turned the meat over the fire. I don't know. Maybe she saw a duck today, says Micah. It must have been a large bird, says Mama. She won't stop saying it. Maybe you can go hunting and bring it back for dinner. What about Kimma? Yes, take her with you, says Mama with a smile. Maybe I can get some work done. At first, Micah did not like that idea. Real hunter did not go hunting for babies on their backs, but he liked having Kimma around. Watching her made him feel very important. So he traps her on his back, and away they went down the long path to the water. He walked with light feet and the way his father had taught him, hardly making a sound. Even Kimma stayed quiet and watched the tall trees go by. Before long, they came to a river. There were large brown ducks splashing and feeding on little weeds in the water. Micah smiled. Did the bird look like that, Kimma? Kimma laughed loudly. Startled the duck. She shook her tiny braids. No, big white bird. Micah scratched his head. A white bird larger than those ducks. He could not think of a bird like that. They followed the bank of the river until out the corner of Micah's eyes he saw something. He turned just in time to see a black bear taking a drink from the river with her cubs. Micah's heart began to pound as he ducked behind a raspberry bush. Kimma pointed at the bear, and Micah quickly put a berry in her mouth. Kimma forgot about the bear and chewed on her juicy raspberry. Micah wiped his forehead. He had to stay very quiet until the bear was gone. There sat behind the bush for what seemed like hours, feeding raspberry after raspberry to hungry little Kimma. The bear took her time to getting a long drinks, then walked slowly back into the wood with her little cup tumbling behind her. Micah picked a few more raspberries before heading farther down the river. Bear, said Kimma when she stopped chewing, but the bear was too far away to hear her. They kept walking quietly down the bank. When they were almost where the river met the ocean, Micah was ready to give up other than soft wave coming and going. The water was still. Soon his feet went the grass to the thick sand. He sighed, looking out the water. There are no birds, but before he could finish, he stopped. There out in the ocean was a boat. At least he thought it was a boat, but it was much bigger than the canoes he had seen. It was long and wide, and it looked like as if it could hold his whole village inside. At the front of the boat there was a point that looks like a long neck, and above their boat there was a long white sails and looks like bird wings. Micah wondered where this large boat had come from. Gemma began dancing with excitement on Micah's back. She gasped and pointed straight ahead. Birds, she said. She calls big white birds. Okay, now I read you another chapter. It's chapter 2. Words to watch for. Pilgrims, a traveler to another land. Evan the pilgrims. Gavin lived at a time when people were just began to settle in America. Gavin was not one of the pilgrims who came to America on the Mayflower. She came years later, but the way she lived would have been much like the way those pilgrim children lived. When Flower would have much to do. Gan probably helped with big jobs, such as planting, gardening, washing clothes, and watching her baby brother. Even though she was a child, she would have worked most days much like grown-ups. Gan was part of a group of people called Quakers, who lived peacefully and often wore plain clothes. Gan might have often worn a plain long dress with an apron covering the front and a white cap on her head. When Gan had time to play, she may have pretended to be a mother to her dolls or to her brother. Many times, girls like Gan's dolls made of anything that they could find, such as rage or corn husks. Her brother, Seaborn, Roy Rattles, might have been made from a gourd filled with dry beans. When baby Seaborn grew up, he probably pretended to be a hunter. Maybe he even plays a game similar to chess. Words to watch for. Nice-clad Philippines, Wunya. Both tree branches, Muscan, a soft leather slippers. Gan and the flood. Around the year 1680s, many ships came from the country of wars to settle Pennsylvania. This story based on the trains those settlers faced. A long time ago, groups of Quakers sailed from way with a little girl named Gan. Her father and her mother, they wanted to cross the Atlantic Ocean and make a new home in America, the land of the free. When they were about halfway across, Gan had a new little brother. Because he was born on the ocean, he was named Seaborn. To Gan, it seemed to be a long time before the ship reached land. Even then, the traveler were not over. Grandfather, with a few other men and their families, went into the wood, where they plans to build their homes. At the first, each family chose a tree to live under. They were glad to any shelter that would protect them from sun and rays. Then, as the weather grew colder, they dug a cave in the bank of the river with a roof of both and beds for leaf. They lived there until they could build a real house full of logs or stones. Then Grandmother was very glad when their long house was finished. It had a ladder out on the outside that led on an upper room, and Gan learned to climb up and down the ladder as quick as a squirrel climbs a tree. Grandfather had built the house on the riverbank far away from his friend. There wasn't much time for visiting, and Grandfather had been lonely if it had not been for Seaborn. He was a year old now, creeping and crawling into all kinds of mischief. Gan spent her spare moment trotting around after him. He was a good-natured baby, but now his teeth were coming in. This made him cross. Oh, how he cries! Mother rubs his gum with her thumb to help his teeth come through, but he cries harder than ever. Gan danced up and down and shook his homemade rattle, but he only pushed her away. The time had come for the big church meeting to be held across the river in town of Philippines. Father will go, but we must stay at the home again, says Mother. We can't take this crying baby anywhere. Grandmother asked her father and Mother to let her keep the baby at home, and they said she could. The next morning, feeling very important and grown-up, she saw her father and mother start to cross in their little boat, bound for the great quarter meeting at Philippines. That very afternoon, Gas wasn't a bit surprised to see a big new tube in Seaborn's mouth when she woke up from his nap. It was an easy as born Seaborn now. All that day and all night it rained. The next morning the sky was still gray and the rain came down as hard as ever. It looks as if it would never stop. Ken saw the river was rising and flowing and overflowing its bank. She hoped nothing would keep Mother and Father from coming home that night. She was a little lonely, but not one bit frightened until late in the afternoon when a narrow stream of water came under the door and trickled slowly across the floor. Ken ran to the door. There was a water 7 inches deep on the house. She could see that it was rising every moment. The only way to go upstairs was by ladder. On the outside of the house, Gan wrapped Seaborn in a swirl and splashing through the water. She carried him upstairs. Then she climbed down for milk and a bowl of cold porridge. By that time, the water was so deep she was afraid to go downstairs again. She wrapped up warmly, lighted a candle, and sat down the doorway of the upper room to watch and wait. It grew darker and darker. Still the rain fell steadily. Seaborn was sound asleep, and Gan was nodding. Suddenly, she sat with a jerk. A little boat was moving toward them over the water and covering the ground in front of the house. It stopped at the foot of the stair ladder. Father, called Gan. Mother, here we are, upstairs in the doorway. But it was neither father or mother who answered. Deep voice says, Miss, come, I take. And Gan looks down into the face of a man she knew. It was Lame Wolf. He had often tried it with Grandfather, and he knew that Gan's parents were at a meeting over the river. When he saw the light from the house, he came as a friend to help. He was called Lame Wolf because he limped a little. Gan was very glad to see him. I take, says Lame. I take, says Lame Wolf again as he held his arm to help Gan. She scrambled down the ladder with Seaborn in her arm. When they fly up the canoe through the darkness, Gan woke next morning to see the sun shining in her face. She was lying in a wigwam. A fire was burning in the middle of the floor, and beside it was a kind old woman crouching over the blaze. "My brother!" cried Gan, springing upwards. Seaborn, the kind woman, seemed to understand. She pointed outside. There, hanging from a low branch of a big tree with several other babies, swung Seaborn's tail was strapping in a special cradle, flat board covered with skins and moss. Seaborn seems to like it, and he smiled and chuckled when he saw his sister. Gan knew that they were at Lame Wolf camp when she saw a number of wigwams and horse tangled about them. Already groups of women were at the work scraping animal skins and trimming moss with the bright-colored heads. Little girls were going to and fro carrying wood and water. Little boys ran past with a bow and arrow in their hands off for a day play. Gan was glad to see her friends. Lame Wolf limped toward her. He said, "Eat, come," and led the way back into the wigwam where Glen was giving a bowl of soup. Then Lame Wolf lifted Seaborn down the tree and brought him and Gan to the chef. Big Bear listened to Lame Wolf's story. He motioned to Lame Wolf to place Seaborn next to his own infant son who was swinging in the shade. He then looked kindly at Ken and called to his little girl, Winnie, who has a peepee shyly around the wigwam. Winnie led Ken by the hand to see the dolls. These dolls were made of deerskin with painted face and beads for eyes. One doll had a fire crops for horsehairs, another hair made out of feather. Each doll had its own cradle, and Get and the chef's daughter played happily together. In the afternoon, Seaborn and the chef and French son were taken from the cradle and put upon the ground to roll and tumble for their hard connect. Gan and Morning were nearly watching them. Suddenly the chef's son began to crawl. His eye grew bigger and brown, and he began to choke. Winna ran for her mother and left Gan alone. Then, in a dash, Gan knew what she must do. Once Seaborn had a button stuck in his throat, the baby must have put something in his mouth that was choking him. So Gan did as she had seen her mother do for Seaborn. She quickly turned him over and hit his back until the object flew out his mouth. It was a smooth white paddle big enough to choke a thousand little babies. Big Deer and his white fangs Gan was saving the child life and gave her a present when she went home the next day. The present was dressed like Winnie, a doll dress for herself, a cradle for Seaborn, and beautiful animal skins for Gan's mother. Thoughtful Gan life, Big Deer. Winner and the chef's son were very good friends. Now this was how to make the dolls that Gan used to place in in the old times, the early Americas. You can see it and you can make it. Okay, and let's get. Okay, now I've shown you this stuff, and it's time to say bye. Bye, guys.